Our mayor, I thank you for this council, this beautiful city of Fredericksburg. I pray that you give them wisdom today. Every decision that comes before them, that you would provide them with clarity and just an attitude of joy to get to serve our great city of Fredericksburg. Lord, your word, you say in your word that your word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. I pray that this council would govern not just for the people of this great community, but according to your word, so that the light of Christ may shine forth in this wonderful city. We give you all the praise and all the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Item number 4 is ceremonial matters, proclamations, and employee recognitions.
No recognitions today, Mayor.
We have one proclamation this morning. Is there anyone here from the community council? I've not met you, so let me met you and tell everybody who you are. Tina Brown. Tina, our good friend Steve Watson is on your board. He's a Fredericksburg resident and also used to work at the Security State Bank, and he asked for this proclamation. Whereas the Community Council of South Central Texas was established as a community action agency on May 11, 1965, and the service area encompasses the South Central and Southwest Texas counties of Atascosa, Bandera, Bee, Brewster, Crane, Comal, a bunch of others, and Gillespie. Whereas community action has made essential contributions to individuals and families across this nation by creating economic opportunities and strengthening communities. Whereas community action is a robust state and local force connecting people to life-changing services and creating pathways to prosperity in 99% of all American counties. And whereas community action builds and promotes economic stability as an essential aspect of enabling and enhancing stronger communities and stable homes. And whereas community action promotes community-wide solutions to challenges throughout our cities, suburbs, and rural areas. And whereas community action delivers innovative services and supports that create greater opportunities for families and children to succeed. And whereas community action insists on community participation and involvement, ensuring that all sectors of the community have a voice and will be heard. Whereas community action is celebrating 58 years of innovation, impact, and providing proven results for Americans. Now, therefore, I, Gerald Hoover, Mayor of the City of Fredericksburg, do hereby proclaim May 2023 as Community Action Month in recognition of the hard work and dedication of all City of Fredericksburg, Texas community action agencies testified on this second day of May 2023. Tina, thank you for being here. Congratulations. Thank you. Item number 5, council comments.
Friendly reminder that the Texas legislature is still in session until May 30th. I was going to give a quick summary, but there are so many bills and they're in all stages of being passed, being killed. So you just have to kind of stay tuned on that one. And just a note on voting, because this might be confusing for people, on today until 4:30 at the Girl Scout cabin, you can vote for city council. But for the county, for the FIC, it's open until 7 out at 95 Frederick Road. So 4:30 for the city, 7 for county. And then election day is Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the middle school. Thanks.
I want to update. market plots, Mark Plots, did have a meeting last week. Update on that. The construction's going on, as you can probably see at the old bank drive-through. That's going on, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that should be complete by the end of the year. That's what our projections are. We're going through a process now of a naming recognition on the buildings and the improvements to it, which should be presented to council before too long. I kind of want to remind everybody, especially since we no longer have a hospital foundation per se, that you can make contributions, and we've now put it in the paper, to Mark Plots in memory of people or what have you. It is a 501c, so you certainly can for tax purposes, but we're short about $120,000 to completion of the project, which we expect we should arrive at. But just a FYI, it is a place. I know many people live in the churches and private schools and what else, but Mark Plots is a 501c2.
As the representative for the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce, just want to report that I've heard from many of their members together and individually in support of the housing authority that we are discussing.
Any other comments?
I had comments, but Emily said everything I was going to say, so I have no comments.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Item number 6 is consent agenda, which we have one item as the approval of the minutes of the last meeting, last regular meeting, April 18th.
I move we approve the council meetings from April 18th regular meeting.
Second.
Motion second to approve the minutes is presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item number 7A is to take action on resolution 2023-07R, designating property located at 701 North Milam Street as a historic landmark. Ms. Hudson, would you kick us off?
Sure. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Glad to be before you today for this occasion of creating a historic landmark. Today we're presenting 701 North Milam Street. It is a house that was designed by and for Jack Stalin. Jack Stalin was a prominent architect who started here in Fredericksburg. He was the son of B. and Arthur Stalin, and he lived from 1930 until 1996. The house, 701 North Milam, retains a lot of its original integrity and look. From the street, it appears much as it did when it was constructed. Some modifications have been made to the rear of the house, including an addition to the master bedroom and alterations to the carport and garage. Some of the defining features of the home are the solid limestone front walls with an oversized front door flanked by large glass panels on both sides. The limestone was also used for the extra wide chimney that extends beyond the flat roof on the front of the house and above the gable to the right side of the house. Cody, do you have the photos up? I want you to see what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Are we going to get there with that?
I'll tell you a little bit about Jack, and then we can come back to the architecture. Jack was married 4 times and had 5 children, and he was also known as a concert pianist. Mr. Stalin graduated from the University of Texas in 1952 with a BA, and then he attended law school from 1952 to 53. He married Jane Bridge in 1952 and received a BA in architecture from UT in 1956. Mr. Stalin became a registered architect in 1962 after working for the U.S. State Department. In 1965, he received his American Institute of Architects designation and practiced mostly in Fredericksburg in the 1960s and early 1960s. In 1967, he founded Stalin Interest with offices in both Fredericksburg and Houston. On his business card, he listed himself as a consultant as a specialist in banks, hospitals, resort centers, schools, and fine residences. Some of his best-known local works include his personal residence at 701 North Milam, Also, 208 Woodcrest, which is a home built for the Fritz family, and that at 208 Woodcrest was a city's first mid-century landmark, so this would be the second. He also designed the National Guard Armory Building, the Dr. J. Hardin Perry residence on West Creek, and the Inn of the Hills on Junction Highway in Kerrville. In Fredericksburg, he officed in Security State Bank, of which his father was the president. In Houston, Mr. Staling designed homes for prominent families in the Memorial and Buffalo Bayou neighborhoods. Jack also had an office in Mexico City. He designed the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City, along with several beachfront resorts. He also designed many high-rise buildings in Texas business parks. He was part of the group with Geach Cook that unsuccessfully tried to create the Texas Embassy Living Museum, which would have been a collection of historic structures in Caldwell County. Mr. Staling was also involved in the Nimitz Foundation and drew plans for a Bavarian inn. All right, we'll go back to the architecture a bit. So this house, let's see.
Can
Okay,
we bring up slide 16? It's on slide 16 on the screen.
There we go. So some of the defining features are the solid limestone front walls with an oversized front door flanked by large glass panels on both sides. The limestone is also used on the extra wide chimney that extends beyond the flat roof of the front of the house and above the gable of the right side of the house. The chimney has a gable pitch cap that mimics the gable of the roof behind it. The house layout is a U shape that creates a center courtyard with glass panels as interior walls. The pool was added later. It is not an original feature. The main living area is an open concept with dining and living flowing directly into the kitchen. The kitchen has been modified by removing the very common feature of upper cabinets that define the space with a pass-through to the dining area. It is now a more modern, fully open concept. There are large clerestory windows on the south facade that let light in, but allow for privacy from the street side of the house as it is on a corner lot. The ceiling is covered with thin strips of wood that carry out to the extended eaves, creating a uniform appearance inside and out. The exterior limestone is also used for the interior fireplace. And true to the time period, the house melds the living area to the inside by using natural materials of wood and stone and allowing the outside in with large glass panels. The use of wood on the ceiling and wood beams creates a warm interior, and this house is an excellent example of an architect-designed mid-century home in Fredericksburg. Jack Staling's personal residence at 701 North Milam has a similar look and feel to the home at 208 Woodcrest, in that it has a very similar towering center gable flanked by flat roofs on either side. The design of 701 North Milam is also very similar to a house he designed for June and Jack Watkins in Llano, Texas. So mid-century architecture was at its height in the 1950s and 60s. It is a time period marked by a new way of designing houses. Many attributes are still found in today's houses, and floor plans include open plan living spaces, indoor and outdoor living areas, and integrated kitchens. Post-World War II, the design world was able to use advances in engineering and improved technologies to use glass, concrete, and steel in new ways. Prefabrication also allowed the building process to come into a streamlined manner and become faster. The formality of the Victorian houses and compartmentalized rooms and bungalows changed to the free-flowing floor plans with kitchens as an integral part of the house, used for entertaining and full of new technology. As Michael Boyd says in his mid-century modern design book, so if Victorian and federal architecture works are protected by preservation laws, then modern architecture should also be guarded by local and national codes and by responsible caretakers. The informed custodian must also know the limits of what can be added or extended, and most importantly, what cannot. And the owner is in favor of this designation. She brought it to me. Castle and I have worked together over the last couple of years on highlighting the importance of mid-century architecture, and we do have a few really good examples here. And so this, again, would just be the second local landmark because it is outside of our historic district, so currently has no protection. It is on the market, the real estate market for sale, and so I think it was important to the owner that it be protected for further changes in the future. Designation is only impacts the exterior changes. The Historic Review Board would have to review any demolition or exterior changes. I know the house might be younger than some of council members, but that does not impact the historic integrity or the designation. The national benchmark is 50 years. So 50 years is usually the time period that we can look back. So you may
You're
remember.
doing well until you got there.
I said,
I was
Go on,
maybe.
Anna, go on.
In 2018, the Historic Review Board did a survey to expand the historic district, and we looked back 50 years. So that's when we started talking about mid-century, and then 1968 was our cutoff then. So this is an early 1960s example, and I think has all the characteristics that we're looking for, and the association with Jack Staling, I think makes it landmark worthy.
The resolution refers to city providing the property owner a statement that describes the impact that a historic landmark designation may have. Has that been?
Yes, ma'am.
Will be.
Yes, sir. Yes, I've met with the owner. We've gone over the requirements, and that requirement was from the last legislative session. That was a new requirement, but we have done that. We also will file the resolution with it in the county, so it'll come up on any deed search. And on the city side, it's an overlay. So when our zoning maps, it'll show up as a hatched landmark. So it's an overlay.
The Historic Review Board recommends it.
Wholeheartedly, unanimously. Yes.
And the owner. Okay.
Yes.
Make a motion, we approve resolution 2023-07R.
Second.
A motion and second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion, questions? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment to thank Anna for her hard work to preserve these mid-century modern, and Castle Heath for the work they're doing on this beautiful home. Thank you both.
And thank you, Ms. Heath, for looking out after those resources in the city, too. You want to get on with your day? You won't hurt our feelings. Thank you. All right. We're now at item 8, other action items and updates. Take action on a conceptual plan for a future nature center to be constructed by the Friends of the Fredericksburg Nature Center at Lady Bird Park.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Andrew Schmidt, Parks Department. This morning we have representatives from the Friends of the Fredericksburg Nature Center here. They're going to come up and give a presentation, which should be coming up hopefully here shortly on your board, on a potential new nature facility out at Lady Bird Johnson Municipal Park. So I'm going to turn it over to Lonnie Childs, who is the president of the group, and he'll give the presentation.
Morning, Lonnie.
Mayor, council members, city officials, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have some time on the agenda to talk about what we think is an exciting project. I'd like to also give special thanks to Andrew Smith, who serves on our board, serves on our advisory committee, and has kind of shepherded us through this process to get us here today. And also appreciation to Councilmember Kirchner, who serves on our advisory committee, and her counsel and advice has been very helpful. And I don't have a presentation, but we'll get started. What I'd like to do is I'll give you a brief history of the Nature Center, the Friends organization, for some of you who may not be aware or need a refresher. And then we'll talk about what we've done at the Nature Center briefly, and then I want to get on to what our project proposal is. Next slide, please. The Nature Center was germinated and the Friends organization in the year 2000 by Bill Lindeman. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Bill. He'd gotten a request from the CVB to come up with a local birding sites that we could recommend to people. He realized there weren't any. He also had the idea, well, why could we have a nature park here? So he went to the city and he had found this 15 acres tucked in the corner of LBJ Park, which was across the creek and really not developable. What Bill saw in it was a real treasure trove of nature, so he put together a proposal for the city. He said, what if I put together a 501c3 organization? We will build the nature center, we will maintain it, and be the support organization. The city accepted that. And so we've managed it for 23 years. In 2015, that agreement was officially codified in a service agreement. So we do have a service agreement with the city. Next slide, please. So you'll see the next slide is our Friends organization is our board members. We recognize a few names there. Our motto or our mission statement at the bottom really is to preserve the natural resources of the hill country, to educate people about it. A briefer way to say that, there's a quote that says, we'll only preserve what we love, we'll only love what we understand, we'll only understand what we teach. So that's kind of the other version of our mission statement, is to get people interested in our natural resources, which are being developed, and be interested in preserving them. Next slide, please. So what's at the Fredericksburg Nature Center? Over the years, we've developed a little over a mile of hiking trails. We've got a couple of gardens, pollinator garden, butterfly habitat. We've built a bird blind, which we've just done some work on, a geology exhibit. We've got other signage and exhibits throughout the nature trails and at the gardens to educate people. This last year, we put in our what we call our butterfly meadow with the bench that's in the picture there, and that's kind of the picture opportunity. We actually had some blue bonnets this year finally. Next slide, please. What's more important, though, than what the Friends organization has done there is what Mother Nature's done there. And in this 15 acres, it really is a treasure trove of nature. Over the years, we've identified over 265 species of wildflowers, 180 birds, 100 butterflies, dragonflies, and damselflies. So there's essentially 7 microhabitats there: a creek area, a prairie area, a forest area. And so in one little 15-acre tract is a whole lot of nature. Next slide, please. So a little bit of bragging about the Friends' contribution this last year. We are a volunteer organization. We raise funds through our membership and donations and occasional grants. So this year we put in a little over 1,800 hours of volunteer labor. If you use the Parks and Wildlife costing method, what's the value of that? It comes up to about $42,000. We put in about $15,000 in funds. About 2/3 of that is really just maintenance, and the other third is new improvements. So contribution of around $57,000 is what we did in 2022. Next slide, please. What's most important, the most important thing we do is our educational programs. COVID, of course, was put a real restriction and basically limited what we could do for several years. But this year we're kind of back on track. We've got 7 adult workshops going on this year, 4 guided hikes, one of which will be this Saturday if you're interested. At spring break and at Memorial Day, we'll have read a book along the trail kind of activity for children, and they can find painted rocks. One of the key things we did for 15 years was our 3rd grade day with a elementary school, where we brought over 200 kids out to the park and took them through various programs. Of course, COVID interrupted that. We had an abbreviated version of that, so we're trying to reinstitute that. And going forward, then, our real thing is, well, how can we do more educational programs? How can we up the ante, specifically when it relates to children's programming. We're doing well with adult programming, but what more can we do with children's programming? Because that's the real key is you got to get kids hooked at an early age that say, I love nature, nature's interesting, and it's something I want to preserve. And so that led us to the idea of, okay, we've had this idea for the length of our organization to have some kind of facility where we could promote more educational programming, and that's what's led us to this project. Next, please. So we put together 3 phases in our project. And the mission of the project is, again, how can we up the educational programming that we do as far as nature at the park, and what kind of facility can we use to do that? So the first phase of our project was a conceptual phase, which says, so what should a nature center be? We don't want to build a building just for building a building's purpose. It's what's the function of the facility? If you had a facility, what could you do with it? And that will lead to what the form of the building is and what the features might be. We'll talk about in a minute about what we did in that conceptual phase. So conceptual phase kind of leads up to today, this is sort of the defining point of our conceptual phase. Then we go into the design phase, which we engage an architect, do a site plan, do a building plan. We would engage in active fundraising. How long will that last? Well, on my slide I said through 2024, but really the gating factor is how fast can we raise money, and then you go into your implementation phase. And along with that, you're designing educational programming. Next slide, please. So what did we do in the conceptual phase? Well, we went out and we visited 11 nature centers in the area, Kerrville, Bernie, San Antonio, visited with their leaders, looked at their facilities, looked at their educational programming, said what works, what would you like to have. Let's see. We conducted brainstorming sessions with our members. We did a survey monkey survey. We had our wings over the Fredericksburg Nature Center event in the park to bring people out and solicit input. So we got a whole list of ideas for educational programming, building features. Our advisory committee winnowed that down. We put together an advisory committee of 16 people, which involves our board members plus 8 other individuals. We winnowed that down to the list of, okay, here's the things that are in the scope of our programming and our building facility. Next slide, please. So, long list here. I'll give you the quick sort of rundown of what the features of the building might look like. Approximately a 4,000 square foot building with obviously educational space in it. That would be some indoor, some outdoor with a pavilion. We would have one room which could serve as meeting space and a classroom. We're going to add exhibits, a lot of exterior exhibits, catering, kitchen, bathrooms, serve as we'll have a little space as an ecotourism visitor center. So just things about Enchanted Rock and other nature centers in the area. Porch spaces. That seems to be very popular at other nature centers. People like to do their hike and have a little place to sit, respite in the shade. We'll expand our gardens outside, a natural playground area. So a natural playground is not swing sets and jungle gyms. It's logs and stumps and a sand pile and rocks, and a very popular feature in all of these nature centers we visited. And so those are the general features that we would put within this facility. Would be a green facility to some extent. Next slide, please. And then more importantly, what would we expand with our educational programming? And again, it's very focused on children's programming, but we would expand that. But part of the request, and Andrew would put it in her budget request, is paid educational staff. So every nature center we went to, the key was they had paid educational staff. We have a good volunteer corps. We're able to deliver some programming, but if you really want to get serious and develop a program with curricula and find curricula, develop curricula, really need this paid educational staff that that designs the programs. And obviously we would have volunteers that could help deliver do those things, but that'll be part of the request in this package going forward. Next slide, please. So cost, these are just estimates at this point, but we've been told the figure about $300 a square foot for the building. Potentially do less because this is not a building where you have a fancy finish out to it. So that would be the main component of that, but there's elements for gardening, exhibits, hardscape and landscaping. And so the total for that is about a little over $1.6 million. So we can phase this out if we choose to build the pavilion first, then raise money for the building, and then the other parts can fall into place as we go forward after that. Next slide. So where would we potentially locate this? We sort of looked all over LBJ Park. One of the major things we want to do is maintain continuity with the trail system, make it contiguous. The most obvious place in this photo, there's Lady Bird Drive. The north is up, to the right is Highway 16. So you come in Lady Bird Drive, past the dog park, the RV park's on the right. The entrance, it's stone entrance, right across from the RV park office is a large open space. It does have some slope to it, but there are two flat areas where we could potentially put a building. So it would be somewhere in that space there. The parking lot is that light colored area, so we do have about half the parking spaces that we would need there, but parking would obviously be something we'd have to figure out because it appears we would need around 42 parking spaces. Next slide. How are we going to raise funds? Well, we've got a long list of potential grant applications we could do. Obviously, we're going to talk to local patrons and donors. We put hot tax money on there. We have gotten a ruling from the city attorney that we would be eligible. So next year we may apply, but we understand that there is much more demand for hot tax money than there is money. So we're not considering that to be a significant portion of our request, but we may make a request there. Next, please. Oh, and I should say we do have about $60,000 banked already. So we do have initial funds to go ahead and engage an architect and do our planning over this next year. What would be the proposed operating model for this? Again, this is kind of an outline, a skeleton. So we would be building this building on city property. So we're obviously, once it's complete, we would hand it over to the city would own it. There is potential for rental income there. We know there's a broad range of what that might look like. We would ask the city to, as you take over ownership, obviously you would take over the maintenance, insurance, and things like that. The next slide, I'll show you what those actual estimates might be. But we would ask that the city, hire a part-time educational staff and probably a director for facility. The Friends organization would continue to provide docents. So to staff the building just for visitation purposes, we would provide the resources for that. We also continue to provide resources for the garden and trail maintenance. We also continue to raise money for special projects on along the trail. And so it would be a kind of a joint partnership as far as the programming with the educational resource there. We have a committee, and we could provide staff to supplement that in terms of delivering programming. Next slide. So what do those estimate numbers look like? Andrea put these together for us. The ongoing cost of the city initially is about $132,000 a year. More than half of that is the staffing cost for this director and this part-time programming person. So it's not insignificant, but it's not a huge number. So next slide. So that's what led me here today. Is basically we're asking for your blessing. What we're looking for is conditional approval of our conceptual phase, which says you're okay with that at this point, would allow us to engage an architect and begin actual planning, but two, initiate an active fundraising campaign. We're glad to come back at any point and report on progress. Obviously, when we got our design, we would come back to the council and ask for approval of our design. And so that's really the sum of my conclusion of my talk today and my request. And I don't know if there are questions, comments, or
Questions, council?
Lonnie, great presentation. Thank you. Where did the 60,000 come from that you have now?
we had raised it over the years.
So it's a continuing.
Yeah.
Always an annual campaign, and so it's a continuing. Or were some of those funds given directly for this project?
Well, we've had what we call a capital campaign fund. We have our operating money, we have a capital, and so people have given money sort of designated as part of the capital campaign. We've always had this idea we're going to build a facility, but frankly, the project kind of lapsed, and so we've picked it back up. So people gave money that said, yeah, we want to invest in that, whatever you do with it. And so last year we split that money off and said, okay, this is reserved for our capital campaign.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So,
Lonnie, I just wanted to thank you for all the work that you've put into this and your army of volunteers that is so active out there. And Tom Musselman for helping out a lot with guidance on how to bring this project here. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for contributing something that's for kids and families to our town. Thank you.
sure. We're happy to do it. All of our passion. So.
I have some questions.
Okay.
How many friends are there?
In the organization,
How large is your group?
we've got about 50 dues-paying members, and we got another 50 that are contributors to our organization.
Okay, so your outstanding labor cost, or the volunteer cost, that's typical of 50 people, or how many people would you say that represents?
No, that's about 20 to 25, about half of them.
The 11 nature centers that you met with
Mm-hmm.
And facility leaders, was this the model that they used? They had city ownership and city responsibility and perpetuity for the employment and the costs?
It was a range. If you go to Kerrville, the Kerrville facility is a nonprofit itself, owns its building and facility. If you go to Bernie, Cibolo, the city owns the land, and maybe some of the buildings. Cibolo leases it from the city. San Antonio, Hartberger, it's owned by the city, and the city manages it, and it's more of a model like we're proposing. And their Friends organization is the supporting organization. So it's a range of possibilities.
Well, did you find that most of them had this kind of an arrangement, Lonnie, where the city took on the responsibility for the maintenance of once it's up and running, and the personnel costs and so forth, that the city participated in that way? Would you say most of them did it that way?
Of that 11, maybe a third of them got that governance model.
So what are we approving today? Are we approving do you have a grant writer?
We're soliciting one right now. I mean, we've got a couple of possibilities. One,
Those are hard to find.
Yeah.
Really, really good ones that will stick with it and write grants with the passion that you have and your organization has. So I wish you all the best.
yeah,
My experience in nonprofits is that these kinds of things are driven by passionate leaders and passionate worker bees,
Mhm.
and that things are easier to create and put on the ground than they are to sustain over perpetuity.
yes,
Because the passionate people tend to go away unless there is a building up from the bottom of a continual group of passionate people who will do everything that you imagine can be done. So I hope you don't hear this as a negative. It's just an observation from my experience that I think can be borne out from many opportunities that I've had to do something similar. So is our decision today, in your view, to just say, attaboy, go for it, come back later when you're closer to it before we could approve any sort of annual expense? Or are you asking us today to say, we will take on what you've recommended here, so please get after the fundraising?
we're asking you for approval of our concept. So conditional approval that allows us to go through and start active fundraising. Okay, so people know we're not going to be raising money and you're objecting. When we get to the design phase, we would come back and say, okay, are you okay with this design? If you said no, we'll either change or, we make the necessary changes. And so we're asking for that conditional approval to proceed to the next phase. Andrea Smith has agreed in her budget request this summer to put in and actually hire the part-time educational programmer so we can get that in parallel with programming going with designing, building, and features. Could I make one response to your? So you're exactly right about nonprofits and passion, and what I would offer in return for that. The Friends organization has been in business for 23 years, and so we do have a pretty long history with the city and maintaining that. And we're also going to use this project as a fulcrum to have a big membership campaign because we think this will help draw people in to participate in our organization and build. We want to build our membership base. So
I think it's a great idea. I think it would be a great addition to the city. I think focusing on the nature aspect is a great addition to what the city offers. I am so grateful to people who will pour their volunteer energies into something like this. I knew Bill Lindeman. I was always amazed at his constant consistency and his vision and what he wanted to accomplish. And he was such a great spokesman. I am all for it. Taking on, I just want to make sure I'm not ready to commit the city resources to this. So I just want to see.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay.
That'll go through your normal budgetary process.
Yeah.
And if it's not approved, then we'll reconsider.
So you're saying that Andrea is going to submit this in this upcoming budget?
Yeah, I hope I didn't do something.
When you say in the budget, are you talking about hot funds or are you talking about?
No, they're talking about general.
So this year we were going to include in our budget request one part-time educational coordinator to work with the Friends of the Nature Center for the educational programs. It would have nothing to do with this nature center, whether it happens or doesn't happen. It would be a standalone position that would be up to council to approve.
I see. So you could make the case for the need of that new person,
Correct,
regardless of this particular project.
yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Whether we proceed with building it or not, it would be a great addition to her staff, and we'll supplement that, and we'll do programming in Pavilion 5 or whatever,
Yeah. I'd love to see it succeed. I mean, it would be huge. And I appreciate your taking the time to do the presentation and your people and all the good work they're doing. It's the kind of thing that makes Fredericksburg stand out, no doubt.
Thank you.
That's all my questions. Anybody else?
Do we just give them authority to move forward? We do a resolution or?
Well, the request is to provide conditional approval for the concept that allows them to proceed with active fundraising.
Yes.
And then they will commit to return to council for regular updates as requested and to return to council for approval of design before proceeding. That's before us today.
So we make a motion that we approve, move forward. I did.
All right, I have a motion. I have a motion and second to provide conditional approval for the project concept presented today that allows them to proceed with active fundraising. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you
Lonnie.
very much.
Good,
Appreciate
good
your
luck. All of you.
Andrea's up again.
Is she?
Warden Martin.
Oh, yes. Okay, item 8B is to discuss and consider options for the future of Fort Martin Scott. I asked and Emily Kirchner asked this to be put on the agenda. You want to go ahead and lay the table for us, Andrea?
Sure. So right now, the city of Fredericksburg is managing Fort Martin Scott. Back in 2019, the city had a master plan that they adopted for the fort. One of the first items was to hire some type of staff to be out there and to start managing it. And then they went through a whole list of other short-term priorities. Right about that time, the Texas Rangers came over and they requested or asked if we had an interest in them managing it. It was in the middle of COVID, so we delayed them a year. They came back. We did sign an agreement. They took over management of the fort in 2021. Then last year, funds were not budgeted for them to continue management, so the city has taken back over. At this point, we don't have any dedicated staff for the fort. We do have 2 part-time hosts, a couple park hosts that live out there, and they open the visitor center on the weekends. But we aren't doing any programs, any events. We're basically just mowing the grass and just making minor repairs as needed. So it's a real asset the city has out there that a whole lot more could be done with, and I hate to see it just sitting out there. So there are several options that we could look at as to how to move forward.
So I wanted this on the agenda, and Emily and I discussed it. I want to make sure, Emily, you agree with me that this, I don't perceive this as a highly urgent matter. It just is something that frankly bugs me that it's sitting there as it is. And since it is a city asset and a heritage site, is there something we could move the ball forward to make more out of this? So I just want to make sure that council, you're clear that there's not an urgency about this. This is just, let's discuss this because something should happen with the fort, it seems like.
But the whole point is it's just sitting there right now, and I've been concerned about that. And I'm not sure if there's a volunteer organization that could step up and kind of like the work that we just talked about previously, to have people that possibly put a board together. Although I know, Emily, you've checked the Parks and Wildlife or the Historical.
The Texas Historical Commission.
Yeah, and so certainly those are possibilities too, but it's a valuable asset we have out there, and we need to take care of it.
There is a new local nonprofit group that has just recently started that would like to support the fort, but they're so new that I would feel uncomfortable actually putting them in charge of the fort. Probably better if city was gonna maintain control. I think they'd be a great asset to support the fort with volunteers and to help with the programming. We probably still need a full-time staff person or a staff person to help manage that and manage the program and manage the volunteers. But that's a possibility. We had $170,000 budgeted for the Texas Rangers. So if we took that 170 and just put it towards some staff and the maintenance that's going on out there, and we use this volunteer group as a support group, that would be a possibility.
Well, what's missing to me is a hard interpretive plan, a program. I mean, we can throw money at it, $170,000, whatever. but to have a good plan that we approve, but the city doesn't have the capacity to do that, to do the interpretation. And it goes back to what I was talking about with Lonnie, is the passionate people who want to see this happen. And unfortunately, and correct me if I'm wrong, council, and anybody in the audience, it seems like we're at a time when the deep-rooted heritage passion is a bit at risk in this community. And some of that's normal because younger people who for years have supported these endeavors and initiatives in the town are now busy making a living and working, sometimes more than one job. And so the dedication of time and energy and passion to something like a heritage site like the fort, and I love the master plan, but every page I was reading, who's going to do this? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do this? The city can't. We can maintain the grounds and the buildings perhaps, but in terms of making something out of it to make people want to come visit and so forth, that's where my hitch is. I would like to, I see Gillespie County Historical Society representative. Were y'all here to respond to our conversation the other day in any way, or are you just observing? Brad and Jim? Sorry? Observing. Okay, observing. Okay. Is it, okay, Andrew, I want to mention that I initiated a conversation. This is Jim Wellhite, who is the president of the board of Gillespie County Historical Society, and Brad Cott, who's also on the board. And we had a conversation also with their new ED, Monty Marshall, the other day. And I was asking if there would be any capacity in the Pioneer Museum organization, which is the Historical Society, for developing an interpretive plan. Not mowing the grass and doing the buildings, but interpretive plan. And knowing that requires a lot. And I also know what it takes to run the Pioneer Museum. So, and that you are in transition, is that a fair statement, Jim? With the new ED and some new staff members and so forth. So my read on our conversation was perhaps, but not now. Is that probably inaccurate? Correct. Okay. So that's not an option to move into right away for the Historical Society to take on a large interpretive plan where they could actually put people on the ground to do it, even if it's quarterly or whatever it is. So Emily and I talked about our options, and one of the options was to connect with the Texas Historical Commission to apply as a historical site. So Emily, I'd like for you to carry on.
Sure. So I reached out to the Texas Historical Commission and was connected with Joseph Bell. He's the head of historic sites for the commission. Right now, they are in charge of 36 historic sites, moving to 38 this year with a Iwo Jima Memorial and something in West Columbia. I just wanted to see what does it look like to just see how we could potentially work together. He said that they have a structured 3-phased approach as they are evaluating properties. First off, to see if it would qualify, and then determine economic viability, and then go into the acceptance rejection phase. And what is required to initiate that is just a formal letter from council wanting to initiate working with them on the fort. And that letter would be sent to their executive director, Mark Wolf, and the chair of the Historic Commission, John Now, who's also on the Nimitz board. And I think the master plan, I wasn't aware that we had this, and so it was great to read it as part of our agenda packet. But I think this would help and be very compelling background information for them. It's interesting because so much was needed at this time when that plan was written, and at that time there was an advisory board committee and the Friends of Fort Martin Scott, and we don't have either of those anymore. So there's a lot of work to be done, but this is another one of those things, just diversifying our tourism, diversifying the cultural heritage options that we have here. It's a treasure, and I don't want it to fall by the wayside.
What would be the advantage of having them close to this historic site?
The funding that it would bring from the state, being able
The state would provide some funding?
Yes.
Or at least we think.
Yeah, they would have to go for a legislative appropriation request, but they could have a lot more programming than we could here. And I can't remember what I saw on the the number of staff members for those sites, but to have a dedicated staff member working on, the culture or the historic preservation, working on the educational offerings.
I checked with the Texas Historical Commission several years ago about another matter. What I think I remember, well, what I do remember, and tell me if this is still the issue, is that you essentially convey the property to them. And so the advantage is it becomes theirs to deal with, manage, and interpret completely. So
That's scary.
yeah, I don't know if they would engage the city in any way, but what I remember was talking to that representative was we might consider not this board, but something else. We might consider doing it, but you understand that you're relinquishing all property. You're relinquishing the property ownership. They get to do what they want to do out there. So the advantage is the monkey's off our back, I guess, but that's a decision to make.
And that's 0 to 100. That's, we could do something, just a partnership with them.
Okay.
That would be a full, they take it over, but we might be able to work together with them.
That's new. Okay.
Yeah, if it's something that we want to hold on to.
So I'd like to see the city make a commitment either to support Fort Martin Scott or to close it, not have people roaming around in there, because what's in there is starting to deteriorate. So we've got to go one way or the other. So I think it would be a good idea to move forward with the Texas Historical Commission to see. I mean, we can if they say you've got to give us all this property, we decide we don't want to, we can say no then. But we need to see where we can go with the Texas Historical Commission. That would be my preference.
Would you be able to pursue that some with them?
Sure.
And because the partnership is new to me, because when we discussed it, it's been 6 years now. There was no option. I mean, it's either all or nothing. Give it to us and we take it, or you keep it. And my preference today would be that we have a good local group that would like the Nature Center, would be passionate and working, and a group of friends and so forth. I talked to the previous person who's one of the prominent people in the Friends, and they've disbanded, right? And they gave their bank account to the Historical Society, I believe. So there's no such thing as a local group anymore. So who's this new group?
I think a lot of that had to do with the Texas Rangers taking it over. So
It
there
did.
was some conflict between those two groups. So you easily, now that the Texas Rangers aren't running it anymore, you could easily revive that group, in my opinion.
Well, let me just expand on that, Sharon, because in my conversation with this person who was prominent in it, this person said that the ability to do that is no longer there. It's the same as the comment was, we're all old.
So we need to find some young people.
But Marvin Schrader, he was on the Fort Martin Scott Advisory Board, and then he became a city employee, and he worked at the fort, and then he worked for the Rangers when they took over. He has actually started a nonprofit organization, and they are a 501c3, and they've been at the Pioneer Museum. They were there during spring break, their group. So he has a pretty big group of volunteers, and he's expressed a lot of interest in staying involved and helping support whoever is out there managing the fort.
Eric Hammerson, you've signed up to make a comment here.
Eric Hammerson, City of Fredericksburg, Mayor, council members, thank you very much for putting this back on the agenda. The first time that I ever heard of Fort Martin Scott was back in 1974, and I was thrilled with the fact that this town had the first fort on the first federal line that was established in Texas after the Mexican-American War. I've always had an interest in military history. I've been to the fort many times. I've also been to almost every other fort in Texas. We're missing a great tourist opportunity. We're not on the Texas Forts Trail, period. If you take a look at places like Fort Concho, which was built by Germans from Fredericksburg, who were shipped up there to be able to do the stonework, they bring in thousands of tourists every year. Great opportunity to be able to do something. We don't even have a way to get there. If you're downtown, you have to get in your car and drive out there. There's no transportation. I would hope that at some point in the future, we can anchor the city with the Pioneer Museum at one end and the Fort Martin Scott at the other, to be able to draw people throughout the entire town. The history of this town is very closely tied with the presence of the federal fort that was there. It was started just shortly after the town was established, and it actually helped provide the funding that kept this place afloat in the first years, because it was real money. Everything out here was a barter basis. So I would commend the idea that you keep working with this. Right now we call it a park. Marvin said, great, give me a bunch of rope and a bunch of boards and I'll put swings up in the trees. It's not a park. It's a historic site. I think that the idea of partnering with the Texas Historical Society makes perfectly good sense, with the idea that hopefully eventually the Pioneer Museum will find themselves in a position where in their award-winning museum, they can take that and apply it to Fort Martin Scott. Right now, the things that are there are deteriorating. If you walk around there, you simply can't read the signs because they have weathered so much. The displays that are inside are starting to deteriorate. Those things need to be taken care of because once they're gone, they're gone. And right now, with the placards that we have out there, they're going to have to be replaced. You can't repair them in the condition that they're in right now. You don't want that to be the situation where you have to replace everything that's out there. Thank you very much.
Council, if I could make another little short speech about this. And when I was mayor in, I think it was 08 or 09, something like that, years ago, we were discussing this very thing about taking the artifacts out of the port and storing them in San Antonio. Natasha Grau was at Pioneer at the time, and she was heading up that. Parks and Rec Department of the city was saying, we can't do anything but maintain it. We don't have the capacity to interpret it. One of the things I talked about with the Historical Society board, with representatives of the board council, was I have a vision for a grand initiative to create some entity that is more of an umbrella entity to take care of our heritage sites rather than each one of them having their own thing. I don't know if this is an appropriate thing, but what I think is happening in the future is that we're losing some of that, as I say, the passionate leadership and the passionate vision, not because the passion is going away, but the energy and the capacity is getting people because of age. And I'm not sure that the upward swing of young people is going to fill the niche. The Pioneer Museum, the fort, the jail, which belongs to the county, so that would have to be a negotiation. The Black Church, or as they do call it, and the people who have the historical roots of that church call it the Old Colored Church, and perhaps other
County Square.
Sorry,
The county square.
yeah. That there is an umbrella organization, the Heritage Sites of Fredericksburg kind of thing, that pools its energy, money, resources, and passion to create this. And it makes fundraising one path. It makes the volunteer organization one path. Perhaps the paid staff, et cetera. I know it's huge. And when I talked to the board members of the Historical Society, we all just kind of thought, yeah, that'd be great. Who's got the energy and time to do that? But it would also be a different stream of tourism that could come in, because rather than trying to shut down what people don't like about the tourism business here, we just compete with it. We bring in other people who will bring families to have a more educational experience and so forth. Maybe chasing a windmill or charging a windmill. And that's the old Don Quixote reference to a fool's errand. But it just seems like that may be the way we need to go in the future, to combine these things rather than each of them having their own separate organization, the friends of, and so forth, and they're all vying for the same dollars. They're all vying for the same volunteers, the same leadership, the same city participation, and so forth. So that's my speech. That's why the Fort Martin Scott is back up, because every time you drive by, you think, and I know, Eric, you're right. We talked about putting up those kiosks at that time, which is 15 years ago. They're weathered and unreadable. That little fort's been an orphan for lots of years. Can we do something? That's my question. Anything else?
That passionate speech reminds me of when you came to Fredericksburg and said you were going to open a theater. Mm-hmm. Your visions are doable.
They are.
So how do we proceed down that road? I also think that there are a lot of young, energetic people, early retirees, people like Lonnie Childs that are moving. He moved. Is he still here? he moved in and just started the Historical Society volunteering and has volunteered. There are people like that moving in. If we have an umbrella like you're talking about to take their energy and their money, we can, I think it's a great idea. What's our next step?
Okay, so you're saying you have seen that new generation, just for lack of a better word?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Would you say that that's
Our business is full.
as the person who is wasn't insulted earlier by Miss Hudson?
Still under 40, guys. Still under 40. Barely.
I can remember when Jack Stone's house was built.
Right.
So would y'all support, I can draft a letter that Mayor Hoover can edit and send to the Historic Commission just to get the conversation going?
I would definitely agree with that and approve that. I think the fort is a huge asset, underutilized asset for our community. And as Eric said, the history is there. That's one reason the town is still here. I'd love to see something happening at the fort, and I think it'd be a great idea.
And of course, it is hot money eligible, big time.
15% of our hot funds can go towards historic use.
Emily, I want to be clear on your recommendation. So, involving the Texas Historical Commission could be a pathway to this partnership along the lines I've discussed, or a separate path. How do you view it right now? Everything you know.
I mean, I think it could be both. I don't think we have to manage everything here in town. You know, I think it's great to be able to partner with related organizations.
Let me remind you that my brother Stan started his career as architect at the Historic Foundation. So he may still, although it's been 30 years ago, he may still have some, well, he does that type of work. They have some insights. And
great, I'll connect with them.
Well, I've seen a couple of renderings of a revival of Fort Martin, and they're beautiful. Mm-hmm. I think Stan did. Okay. Anything else on this topic? Thank you for your conversation. Thank you, Andrew. All right, item 8C is continued discussion regarding the creation of a public housing authority. I ask that this be on the agenda continually to take further steps and have further discussion, maybe break the clouds a little bit, maybe blaze the trail, whatever. So
let me make a comment. I got a call from one of the commissioners, and we have one here in not Charles didn't call me, but he made a comment that they wanted to be involved in this. So have we gone back to the judge, and I'm not trying to put Charles on the spot today, but to see if they have talked about it anymore.
I have not conversed with the county at all about the housing authority. Has anybody?
I have spoken with the judge and each of the commissioners about the concept of a housing authority and how it, you know, when you set up this entity, it can go 5 miles out into the county. So I would really like them to be involved in maybe selecting one of the board members. I didn't get yelled out of any of the,
No,
I didn't get anything signed saying that yes, they're in it. But as far as their level of involvement, I don't know if, do they want to start their own housing authority that we could have a Gillespie County kind of thing, or what kind of involvement?
I just think that conversation needs to take place because he was concerned specifically that if it is outside the city limits, it's on county property, and that they certainly ought to be involved in it.
Let me interrupt here to insert into the record. We had our joint meeting, our special meeting last Wednesday, and I failed to check my email right before the meeting and found out that there were 3 people who submitted comments for that meeting that I did not note. So I want to put it in the record now. One was from Annette Bennett, who spoke to us in person the other day, concerned that the issue is too large and complex to be implemented in one workshop, one city council vote. I think she was under the impression that we were going to pass it that night. So she's just recommending that we have more than one workshop and more opportunity, which we are, more opportunity to discuss it more deeply. Francesca Poston, also a city resident, Please record my vote as a hard no on creating a housing authority paid for with tax dollars. And then from Jeanette Hormuth, who I see is here today, many concerns regarding the Public Housing Authority proposal. Appears it's being rushed to a vote, but I remind you that this was last Wednesday that these were submitted, so we'll take that into consideration. I do have some people who would like to speak, a couple of people who would like to speak on this morning. Carol Hammerson.
Carol Hammerson. I live in the city, and listen, what's going on here? It's so exciting. You know, we're talking about housing. Finally, it's out here. We've got a great idea for a nature themed activity and ways to bring families as tourists to Fredericksburg. This is an exciting time. You know, I'm so thrilled to hear this, and I see the energy around it. My only concern is very simply this. We saw recently with a situation with a high school, not the high school, the hospital, sorry, looking at the traffic in my head and not at the institution. The thing that most often derails anything in this town, and I say this as someone who's come to live here and wants to be here, is when people don't feel their concerns are heard. So, however, this housing, wonderful housing concept advances, I would encourage you to find a way to let people say what their top 3 questions are, what their concerns are, whether that's something they submit to the city or to a board if that's established. We don't want to have anything that appears to be in the dark. Not that I believe that's the intent of anyone in this room. It's just perception. And we saw what a devastating fight it was with the hospital and how people felt betrayed because they weren't heard and they weren't included. So, open concept and lots of listening, and no, they're not going to get all their questions answered the first or the next council meeting or the 10th council meeting, but just let them ask the questions and know that somebody will eventually get around to doing it. That's my sermonette for the morning.
Thank you, Carol. Jeanette, are you signed up to speak today?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning, it's Jeanette. I appreciate the fact that you're taking time with this. It's a very complex issue, I believe. I feel for the fact that people want to help with housing. There are a lot of concerns and a lot of questions. I could just do a couple today that come right off my head. First of all, a lot of times something looks real good and you want to do something good, but when it's not fleshed out deeply, then unintended consequences come down the road later. And that's what I'm concerned about. So, and we do have different affordable housing around here that was put up. It might be a different structure, but still things are run down. I know young people that one guy used to work at the hospital, in fact, and they lived at one of these places, and it was horrible. And they got out, and now they have to live in Kerrville. But one of my major concerns is who's paying for it. I heard the other day on that meeting that the possibility of that there be tax exempt property if the city's using their property to build these houses. It's tax exempt. Okay, it's good for the builder. It's good for maybe the people there. But who's going to pay for that? Because you now have all these more people living here. That's maintenance on the infrastructure, the services, and all that has to be paid for. You have more people using the roads, everything. Is that going to come out of our taxes? I'm a working person. I want the people that they're trying to have affordable housing for, but yet, it's like robbing from Peter to pay Paul. if our taxes are impacted because of the bigger structure of administration, whatever is involved here might not be directly, you say, oh, they won't be, there won't be any tax money, but if indirectly is what I'm worried about. So that's a big issue. The other one is this board that's not elected. Again, that removes from the people, it puts another entity away from the people. Like, who's going to be accountable? And if something goes wrong, you know, who's accountable? And how do the people reach that? You are all directly accountable to the people. We vote for you. You're supposed to be our representative, so we have that direct link where we could voice our concerns, and you listen and you try to work for the people. You have this board over here conducting this thing. To me, that's kind of a red flag. So anyway, those are just a couple of things. I have more, but I would hope that you dig very deeply in all directions with this, because there are a lot of concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Eric?
Still Eric Camerson, still in the city. Thanks very much for last Wednesday. I appreciate that. It was opened my eyes, gave me a lot of opportunities to be able to do some more research and figure out what might be done. This concept of a municipal housing corporation, right? The counties have the authority to be able to do county housing corporations. They can be regional housing corporations. There are a variety of things that are listed in the law. I commend you for taking a deliberate approach to making a decision as to what you want to do. This is one card in a whole hand that we're going to probably have to play in order to address this issue. I think it would be a wonderful idea. It's been used for many years in different places in Texas. What a great opportunity it would be to bring people in and say, what were the lessons learned? What worked, what didn't work? What would you do differently if you had to do it today? Obviously not places necessarily like San Antonio or Austin or Houston, but mid-sized towns around the state. The question for the city attorney, are there any legal authorities that allow you to set priorities for who's going to use these limited resources? Are there any legal authorities for allow you to be able to say, we're doing this for housing for folks who work here? If we have a municipal housing authority, is there anything to say that folks who live somewhere else and work somewhere else can't come here and live, and therefore our teachers, our firefighters, our maintenance workers, our custodial staff won't have the opportunity? Can we set priorities? And if so, how? Those are the sort of things that I think you should consider as you're looking forward for this. And finally, it would be, is this the best first step to take? There are a wide variety of housing options that were in Vince's plan. I read it several times. Is this the best first step to take? I'm not saying this is the only step to take. Like I said, it's going to be one of many, but is this the thing that we try first? I advocate the idea of trying something first. Let's try the one that's got the best return on investment. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to note too, since I mentioned the comments that I've received written, that we've also received a support letter from the chamber and from various members of the chamber. I know that council has probably received, if you're like me, you've received some emails from employers in town who are having difficulty finding labor, staff, and directly related to the housing challenges. So I know that there's the debate continues. I just want to say that I did in the midst of doing some research about what a housing authority is, I've had to overcome some prejudices and some biases in my head about what that is. And so doing some research on that has helped me. And I think that my misunderstandings may not be atypical. I think that there are people in the community who feel that a housing authority suggests something other than it is, which is that it makes it possible for people to have a place to live that have no business buying a place to live or having, they have no business. In other words, they're not taking care of themselves in the right way, et cetera. I think, Eric, to answer your question, but don't hold me to this, but I think the answer to your question is that in the bylaws of a housing authority, you can set up, this is for this, and it has to be, is that your understanding, Emily? That it has to be, that there's a relationship to the people that it intends to serve, and if it's a percentage of AMI or something, let's go ahead and get.
Yes, if you have a municipal housing authority, they're required, of course, like any other corporate entity, to adopt bylaws and have foundational documents. But in order to achieve their exemption for tax donations, they have to meet certain requirements of their bylaws. And generally that is to make their services broadly available to the public. So to answer the basic question about could you limit these services to be provided to people who already live in the community or employees of public groups, probably not. Those that's why you see entities like the school district provide direct housing benefit to their employees sometimes. Some cities set up a housing department in the city, which also can obtain federal funding and other sources as well, and they have a little bit more flexibility in that regard. But the public housing authority, like I said, in order to meet the two basic IRS exemptions that they could qualify for, are going to have pretty broad-based benefits. Also, much of their funding will come from federal programs or other programs that are administered by the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, and those will require those funds to be used for anyone who qualifies, no matter where they're from or what their job is.
If the city set up a housing department, as you first mentioned, as you mentioned earlier, would that be run and operated by the council?
Yes, it becomes a city department, but still, if you're receiving federal benefits for that group, they're going to have to comply with virtually the same rules.
Right. Okay.
Can the housing authority in the different developments offer preference to?
Okay. Without getting too detailed, housing authorities typically have restricted funds and unrestricted funds. The restricted funds are those they receive from grants and federal funds that are for particular purposes. Those don't generally allow preferences unless a grant is designed to provide preferences. Like, for instance, you may, on rare occasion, have received grant money to assist members of a particular racial aspect or some other type of cultural quality. Without that type of restriction on grants, the federal funds are going to just have to be broadly available. Those are restricted funds. If the housing authority is able to develop income in other ways, those are unrestricted funds, and there's more flexibility with that. But as I understand, a lot of what's been discussed about this particular entity that might be developed here, a lot of it's going to be involved in helping establish PFCs and perhaps some tax credit development. And those are going to have to be, the benefits of those are going to have to be broad-based, so they couldn't be too much in the way of preferences like we're talking about now.
If the housing authority were to, I don't know if partner is the right word, but partner with, an example would be the school district or the hospital that have land available, to make this land available for a PFC to be built on or some type of development, would it, then again, would that allow preferences?
I'm not real familiar with that. I know Houston has done some of that type thing with PFCs, but I just have to know more about what the proposals are, and we'd have to do a lot of research to see if that would work. I understand what you're saying,
but I'm not sure that the housing authority could be that aspect of it. It would have to be the donor agency, perhaps. But that would require more research.
Sure. Sure, step up and,
Thank you. Good to see you, Mayor Council. Housing authorities use what they call local preferences all the time. And what you can do in your administrative plan is basically say, okay, if we have a waiting list for a certain program, we say we're going to provide preference for individuals that may already live here or may already work here. The key is making sure that your local preferences do not discriminate against a protected class. That is the key. In your partnership or giving away tax credit or giving away tax exemptions to a partner, some of that is negotiable. The whole point of a local housing authority is to support the local community, where you don't want to set something up. You want to make sure that the housing authority, first and foremost, is supporting your existing citizenry. So you have that capacity, again, whether it's restricted funds or not. Housing authorities use it all the time. You can even go down the scale as far as, like, say, if you have a person that's is a victim of domestic violence or some of those other things. So you can establish a precedence. And the key is does that precedent create a discrimination of a protected class? So again, housing authorities do have and continue to use local preferences to support that. Specific to a group, in other words, let's say if you preference individuals that work at the school district or something like that, you do not see that specific. You could, but it could be challenged with respect to um, potential discrimination against fair housing laws. So normally the preferences don't go that specific. You're talking about the difference between publicly available housing and privately available housing. If the school district, in essence, wanted to build some housing on their property, and it for their employees, yes, they could do that. That would be considered private. They would still be subject to fair housing laws. They could not discriminate within their organization, but they could do that if they elected to do so.
Question I've got on, and I know it's details and we'll get down to those, but I can imagine if you sit there and say we're providing housing for the locals and you've got to be employed and things of that. But what happens if all of a sudden you get a new hotel complex and they decide who decides who gets to go in and who doesn't? I guess the board does, right? In other words, they build a new hotel and all of a sudden they need 100 employees. Did they get first shot at those apartments?
Well, again, it's based on the preference. The preferences would be set up typically in your administrative plan for the housing authority, not necessarily in the bylaws. You could codify them in the bylaws if you wanted. So again, you just specify them. Do you? And it's not that you're not allowing other individuals to come in. You're simply providing a preference. Typically, it would be like in a waiting list situation where you're already filled and you've got a 6-month waiting list of people waiting to get in. So if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, I live here and I work here," they say, "Hey, we're going to put you at the top of the list." That doesn't mean that we're denying an individual from coming in that doesn't live or work here. It's just the person that does. It provides an opportunity to, again, ensure that your local housing authority is supporting your local citizenry first that need. So you're not incentivizing individuals of low income to come into your community.
any other questions for Vince?
Vince, I have a question. If you could help us, because since we haven't seen this before here, kind of walk us through what an opportunity would look like. So say we've established the entity, we have a board in place, we have, bylaws, administrative plan. What happens? Like, can you walk us through what, maybe some grant money would look like going through the process?
Yeah.
Or anything?
Currently, as I had mentioned last week, that there is no specific grant money for the administration. What the purpose of this is going to look for partners to develop affordable housing developments. So there are a myriad of for-profit, nonprofit developers that are taking advantage of the low-income housing tax credit. What we're finding out is that a lot of times the low income housing tax credit program and developers had not traditionally participated or were getting involved in housing authorities. But due to their constraints on the cost of the development, is that they are, even with the fact that they're getting tax credits and they're able to qualify for mortgages, it's simply not enough funding to support the total project based on the requirement of the rent restrictions. So the purpose is to partner with a local unit of government such as the Housing Authority that has established a Public Facilities Corporation in order to combine resources to take advantage of the tax exemption that the Housing Authority has, which reduces the overall initial development cost and operating cost. So in essence, I don't think that this housing authority would be going out and doing anything exclusively on their own. It's specifically to have an avenue to, as a unit of government in a public-private partnerships, subject to getting a development. Additionally to that, the ability to acquire or to receive public land, because that's what we're talking about here, is what starts and stops all of this is the availability of appropriate land at an appropriate price in order to establish that. So that's also an asset that the local housing authority could take on and put in a partnership in order to make sure that these developments are up. And primarily the reduction of the cost means the affordability goes up. So the more you can reduce the cost of the development, the greater the percentage of affordable units you can put into a development.
So it's all established, developer XYZ applies. Do they come to the housing authority first and say, hey, I want to partner with you on a project? And then they apply to the TDHCA for lower income housing tax credit?
It depends on who controls the land.
So say for this, I'm just trying to do a hypothetical.
Yeah.
So say the city owns some land,
Right.
and we would like for there to be affordable housing on it. So what happens next?
You could basically go to the established housing authority and said, hey, we've got some property here that we, whether we sell it, lease it, or give it away, we're going to allow you to do what you need to do to build on it. So because it is controlled by a unit of government, then you would have the opportunity to go out and do a request for qualifications or a request for proposal by a variety of developers and say, hey, we've got this land, we need affordable housing on it. What are you proposing to do? What type of partnership? What do you need? What can you provide? What's your track record of doing these? So you have the capacity to pick and choose who you are going to partner with. If you don't or not in control of the land, let's say a tax credit developer comes into the community and puts a piece of property under contract, but needs the partnership or is looking to partner with the housing authority, then you would only be negotiating with one group because they have control of that specific property. So it would be a back and forth with only one.
Thank you.
But when you say you negotiating with builders and things like that, you're speaking of the authority, not of the council.
That's
right?
correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So on that, why? Because I've seen it in other cities where like the city will establish the housing authority, and so like city council members are on the board of the housing authority. Is that something that would be more palatable in our city? Just make it legally? Could we do that?
No,
Okay.
the statute does not allow officers or employees of the city to be on the board itself. Although there are some housing authorities that have created in their organizational documents, ex officio members, and so does it mean the city manager may sit in on all meetings? That's true, and like Victoria does that. But I don't know. But as far as being a voting member, it can't be an officer.
You're right. I can, because I know that there was some concern about giving up your authority as far as the being an elected official. What I can tell you is that right now there were 7 House bills to strengthen the public facilities law, and it has passed the House. One of consolidated has passed the House, and there are 3 components that are kind of closing those loopholes. So the first is that any entity, regardless of whether it is formed by a housing authority, cannot go outside their territorial jurisdiction. In other words, there was concern about a unit of government in Travis County literally to be able to come into your community and build an affordable housing development and take your tax dollars. In other words, don't have to come to you and get approval to get a tax exemption. That is part of this modified bill that would be eliminated. There's also additional affordability, deepening of the affordability requirement on who you're are going to support, so that there's not market rate units, that you're doing a lot of affordability. The third thing, and most importantly, is that if you have a public facilities corporation that is going to initiate a tax exemption, then the proposed statute will require the Public Facilities Corporation to come back to y'all and get approval. So I know you had mentioned on Wednesday that was a concern of we don't have a say, and it was even communicated here as a question about that. So I feel I would say there's probably a 90% chance that this modified public facilities law will be approved, moved through the Senate, and be law. It sailed through the House, so that will alleviate some of the concerns that y'all had provided. And quite frankly, I'm approving those recommendations as an affordable housing consultant on what they're doing to strengthen that. So, one last question: the housing authority cannot have appointed officials or employees of the city, but there's nothing in the public facilities law that states that. So technically, you could have a board of the housing authority with no employees or officials of the sponsoring unit of government, but the PFC could. I would just say, though, that would be the decision of the appointed board of the housing authority to make that determination.
Thank you, Vince. Council, what I wanted to accomplish this morning with this item, if we could, is to get a sense of the council of your desire to move forward on this regarding a schedule. Which do you feel that we're a few meetings away, or that we are just days away or weeks away? What questions do you have that are burning to be answered? Who needs to be in front of us to answer those questions? What are you hearing from the community? Just get a sense of where we are on this particular issue.
From the community, I'm hearing a great deal of support, but within the council, I still hear a great deal of questions. Based on the 5-mile radius thing, shouldn't we do a workshop with the county commissioners so that we all have a better understanding of what we're doing? That would be, if I were to choose a next step, that would be my next step. Charlie still here?
I agree with you,
Is
Sharon.
that possible, Charles? Thank you.
What'd you say?
I agree with Sharon on that. I've got a lot of questions still. I've got real concerns, although, of course, we don't know until, I guess, June 1st if the state legislators passes that or if the governor signs it in the law. But I've got concerns about accountability, as we all do. We've had some cases in the past that Doesn't seem to be. And so I'm frightened about that. Also, there's a lot of questions and details, and I assume that the authority board would come up. I had one come up this last week from a citizen that said, how long do you let them have those tax exemptions? And of course, the question about it is it for life? I'm not sure our council ought to be setting things out there for life. And then, of course, there's a lot of questions. Are they employed, or are the people that are just on welfare going to live in these things? There's a lot of questions. So I'd say we continue to have more meetings with visit with the county about it. I'm not against it. I just want to make sure it's a good deal.
I've been hearing support for it. I have a letter from Leslie Washburn, who owns Hoffman House, and with her and her family on Side Street. They're very much in favor of it. She said, our employees want to live here. They don't want to commute. And that this would be a great first step in building affordable housing. There are questions that need to be answered. I believe we can answer those fairly quickly according to the statute. As far as the board, it is a government agency that open meetings, open records. So it's something that's all done in the open. It's not like other boards that make decisions without getting communities interaction. So there are some guidelines that would make this different. Quite frankly, I just think it is a great first step. All we're doing is creating this board, and then the real work starts. So that's my opinion. Emily?
Just in terms of scheduling and what it's going to look like going forward, I don't think we need to have a referendum for every complicated or complex decision that comes before us. I think elections is the referendum, so we need to be sure we're doing our homework and being vigilant and diligent. Sorry, and taking action and not making sure that we poll everybody to make sure everyone is going to be okay with this. Sometimes we just have to make the hard decision. So as we go forward, I'm just throwing this out there because we're just talking about the county, but would y'all be amenable to having, one public meeting with the county, joint thing, we just flesh it all out, and then, if the county wants to participate, then maybe we go that route after that, or if they do not, then the city would then keep moving forward with forming something soon? Or do y'all want to have, is there like a structure to the number of public meetings y'all are wanting to have going forward?
Well, I'm perfectly willing and think it would serve the community well for us to have certainly the one, and possibly more. I think that sometimes these things develop and you think we got some good things discussed here and some answers of questions answered and so forth, but we probably need another session, to address some of these issues because it is new to us. I know we're not inventing the wheel. This has been done in other communities since the 60s. And we've got some nearby that we can check and so forth. But in my mind, this is big. This is not a slam dunk that, well, this will be the answer to what we've been looking for. There are many things that I'm still not confused, that I don't have answers in my own mind about whether this is good. I agree with you, Bobby, that once it gets started, then the work starts. But that's where my head goes. So then what? You've got the organization. What do they do? Do you believe that we have that kind of personnel in this community who can be the commissioners on that board that would serve the purposes that we're all hoping it does in perpetuity? I talked to the person who I've mentioned this at Wednesday's meeting about the McAllen Housing Authority. And a couple of key points that this person made over and over again was you must have the right people as the commissioners. And when he described what that housing authority was able to accomplish in the 40 years it's been going, it was very clear they had very diligent, focused, talented, community-minded, smart, experienced, knowledgeable business people in place in that commissioner's court, not county, but the commissioners of the housing authority, and that they were able to accomplish some really extraordinary things there. One of the questions that comes up all the time is, well, tax exemptions. That's what concerns people, right? They're thinking, I want to have some part in addressing the housing challenges of Fredericksburg, but there's no such thing as diverting taxes. You can say this is exempt, but then it becomes a more burden on the people who are paying taxes, and that's a logical assumption. So I asked, or a logical reality. So I asked this person in the McAllen, how do you keep your properties on the tax roll? And these housing authority properties that they develop there, they do homes. They do home developments. They don't do apartments. And when you have a home development, a person buys a mortgage. And once they buy a mortgage, then they are on the tax roll. So a housing authority doesn't necessarily mean that you're providing tax exempt properties for people to live in perpetuity. You're grimacing at me, Tim. Do you think I'm wrong? Because it's what I told. I asked him specifically. I was going to bring this up Wednesday, but I wasn't sure. And they had their own mortgage facility, this housing authority in McAllen.
That's like the Habitat for Humanity. They
Yes,
do the same
and
thing.
he told me the people that they service in this community, and they become community members, and they're invested and so forth. But they pay taxes on their property. The housing authority made it possible for them to have that. So that was a different model for me. So I'm just saying that we need to find out more what the bandwidth of the models are that we can look at. So and I'll work with the county commissioners court to arrange a meeting for us to have a joint meeting and discuss all of these things, and that'd be the next step. Okay.
Mayor, if I may, I don't want to get so far down the road on just this one option of public housing authorities. If there are some other low-hanging fruit that we could also be talking about, I don't want to blow this up into some huge, big, all housing fixes discussion, but if there are, zoning changes or very specific things that we could be doing as we talk about
to
it,
include in the discussion.
would that
Sure.
maybe be helpful? Because I don't want to spend months doing this when we could also be focusing on other housing items.
All right.
But hasn't Vince spent months doing this? And isn't this what he recommends? Am I incorrect?
Are you asking Vince?
Yes. Well, I'm asking, y'all have all read his report. So
Well, he's
I'm
made
asking all of you.
He's made a range of recommendations. Yeah.
This isn't the silver bullet like we talked about. There's lots of options. So I'm wondering if we can talk about those too.
Also, I want to
I
bring
like what you said. I agree.
Also, I want to bring to the council's attention that Vince's 4-month extension to his original contract is ending June the 6th. We do have $25,000 of possible additional funding if we want to extend his contract. We could also entertain going back to the original funding partners and possibly some other funding partners if we decide that we want to extend this contract, and we can get with Tim Lindbergh and go over details about what the extension looks like.
You're saying the money to extend his contract is already in the already approved budget that we're working on.
That's correct.
Right
25,000. Yes.
So I would be in favor of continuing that.
Well, that's not before us today.
Yeah, and the other part is I'd really like to get the county, since there's some different leadership over their opinion on that too.
Sure, absolutely. I just wanted to bring it to your attention that his contract ends June the 6th. So unless we do something, the services won't be available. Unless he wants to talk
Can
to
that
us
be on
free.
the next meeting's agenda?
Yes.
Extend Vince's contract.
Yes. Yeah, I'll work on getting that ASAP. Anything else on this topic? You ready to move on? All right. Thank you for all of that. Thank you, Vince. Item 9A. All right. Item 9, City Manager Report.
Okay, Mayor, Council, and this will be a repeat of what Emily mentioned earlier. A lot of the election dates coming up. Shelley has a short presentation she'd like to give again, just to remind the council, the public, those that are watching, of these very important dates. Can we get that pulled up? There we go.
Next page, please. Okay, so I've provided you with the early voting total so far for in-person voting. It actually totals, as of yesterday, 821 in-person voting. This does not include the 35 ballot by mails that I have received, and it doesn't include 3 provisionals. So
How's that compare?
we're low. We're slow.
I'm sorry?
The turnout is low.
What turnout is low compared to other years and
Yes,
early
sir.
voting? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Can you compare that to the last election, the numbers roughly?
I would say we are maybe 500 to 1,000 lower.
Lower. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
The next page. So as Emily said, there's still time to vote. If you haven't voted, you can still vote as of today till 4:30 at the Girl Scout cabin. And of course, election day is from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the middle school library. Next page. And like I said, the ballot by mails this year, we received 42 applications, which is also low for ballot by mails. And as of yesterday, we've received 35 back. The last day for the city to receive ballot by mails is Monday, May the 8th, but at 5 p.m. But of course, there's some additional requirements for those to be able to be processed. Next slide. So I wanted just to go over with you what's going to happen on May the 6th. So at 8:30 a.m., there will be 5 members of the early voting ballot board that will meet to go over the ballot by mails and verify the signatures and that information. At 9 a.m., the remaining members of the early voting ballot board will get together and start counting your early voting ballots, and that you're in person as well as ballot by mails. At 7 p.m., the election day poll will close, and those ballots are counted at the poll. A member of the early voting ballot board will come back to City Hall and provide me with the count. I don't accept that count till 7, so the word is not out there who's leaving or who's not. So then an unofficial tabulation will be released and posted on the city website and at City Hall. Next page. Okay, what comes after the election day, I wanted to make you aware that Monday the 8th, I will deliver any provisional ballots we have to the county's voter register. And then before May the 15th, I have to have 3 members of the early voting ballot board reconvene, count those ballots, count the provisionals that the county says are eligible to be counted. Then May the 15th, we're going to hold the canvass for the May 6th general election. And the two candidates with the highest votes will be sworn in and also receive a certification of election. And then on Tuesday, May the 16th, during the regular meeting, we'll do the ceremonial oath. And again, the mayor will issue a certificate of election.
Shelley, is there any way where they announce these elections? Is the city have a web page that you can look up, or
We do.
Yeah.
or do we give them your cell phone number?
No. We give an election.
Oh, Shelley.
Shelley.
I will send it out. There is also, Lee has created a link to where you can go in and sign up. And that, again, you can find that on the election page. You can sign up to receive. So as soon as the unofficial tabulation is posted, you'll receive that information as well. So again, go to the city website, which is www.fbgtx.org. Yes, you'll receive the results by text or email.
Thank you, Shelley.
You're welcome.
Okay, next is our proposed budget calendar, and this is a work in progress. We wanted to get this in front of the council. Krista's going to hand this out and just make sure that a lot of these dates will work. We currently have 10 council meetings associated with the budget calendar. Last year we added just a few more workshops again. We want to make sure that everyone will be able to attend, or most everyone will be able to attend these. So if you could get your calendars out. We've highlighted the dates, starting with the capital improvement plan on June 6th, that presentation, number of public hearings and so forth, regular council meetings. You could just verify you'd be available. Just working through, again, we're going to be kicking off at the end of this month, providing guidance to department heads for development of our budgets. We'll present the capital improvement plan again on June 6th. June 21st is a council workshop. Council budget priorities. You've given a lot of those to me. We'll refine that list. July 5th, the public hearing, the first public hearing for citizen input on the budget. July 19th, another workshop. And if you'll recall, we generally divide the early workshops up into general fund and then we go to enterprise fund budgets on July 26th. The city-county joint meeting comes a little bit later, August 9th, August 16th, council workshop on all funds. So we've had a chance to discuss both. We're getting back together to discuss both funds combined. August 30th, we published a notice of a public hearing for a meeting September 13th, public hearing on tax rate increase if necessary. And then September 19th is the date budget adoption. So a very substantial process that begins this month and wraps up a little bit after the middle of September. So if you know today that you might have a conflict on any of these dates, I would be interested to learn that so we can set this. If not, if you could let us know by the end of the week so we can make adjustments. I'll also note that another thing that we're doing with this calendar is we're creating an Outlook calendar so that all of this will be on your on iPads. You can access on your phones through your city account, so you won't miss a meeting. All the times, locations, everyone involved in the presentations, you'll be able to see that on your calendar. So again, just transitioning to that digital version of the calendar. With that, Krista, do you have anything to add?
Did we just do this last year?
We did. We do it every year. I wish it was every 2 years or maybe every 5 years. Not because the council's old, just because it takes a lot of time, right?
Second.
That was a joke. Just for the mayor. So if you have any conflicts, let us know. If you would by the end of the week.
Questions, comments, council?
Sorry, Clinton, does this mimic what we did last year with the extra departments? I'm sorry, the extra meetings that we had
Yes.
with everyone? Okay.
Almost exactly. It's just about the same every year. We shuffle a few things around. We might need to add an extra workshop, just depending on the discussion this year. Again, depending on what the priorities are. There may need to be a discussion, for instance, about parks, sports park, nature center, whatever the case may be. So we can always add something in if we need a little bit more time for discussion.
And the only meeting with the county is August 9th. Can we maybe flag that one of our joint meetings is talking about budget things earlier on? It seems like every year, the last minute crunch, we find out from both sides different numbers.
Right, and I agree with that. And something that Krista and I talked about just last week is involving the county every step of the way from the very beginning. I'm starting to meet with Daniel every couple of weeks with a list of items. This will certainly be on that list. We're going to get out ahead of that this year, make sure that we're coordinating with the county on the shared budgets or otherwise.
Emily, I'm sorry, my hearing handicap didn't allow me to understand what you said. Are you recommending to move the workshop with the county up in the schedule?
No, I'm saying we just need to make sure that the county is being included in other conversations earlier on. So like our joint meeting that we had, the one, we have more of those, make it about maybe a budget, high level budget discussion.
Okay. Anything else about that? Let me thank you and Krista for the work. I know that's something to get all of that coordinated. All right. Future agenda items.
Okay, future agenda items for the May 16th regular meeting. Of course, we have the minutes. We have a request by Rebecca Rather for a land use change and a zoning change on 414 East Austin Street. Anna, anything to add on that one?
That one will go to city or to P&Z tomorrow. It may get kicked back back to staff for a larger area to review, but it is a zoning change from R1 to C1.5.
And that's on 3 properties, correct?
Three individual properties in the middle of the block.
Okay, we have a conditional use permit for an STR unoccupied in an R2 zoned area.
We did this last.
Yeah, needs to come off.
Okay, so that needs to come off, and it's not Lynn Bizzle, so that one's off.
Lynn, you in the STR business?
Approve the extension of the CBB Center lease. I think we're ready to go on that one. We've made a couple of final adjustments. We also have 3 annual parades and discussion of the city sponsoring the July 4th parade. Mayor, I know you have some ideas on the 4th parade.
Mm-hmm.
We have that item coming up. We have the franchise agreement for Universal Natural Gas, Chris Canese. We've been speaking to communities that have this service in their communities. We'll have a little bit of background on that. We'll provide ahead of your approval. Consideration for approval. We have an IT item for the purchase of a file storage system. This was a budgeted expense. It will be a lease purchase. We have our mid-year budget amendments that we've started working on that we'll provide to the council well ahead of this meeting so that you can review and ask questions. We're being very careful about assembling all of that information so it's very understandable by the council. The next item is off. The opioid participation forms. That's something that we're handling at the staff level. The resolution has already been adopted by council. We have an amendment to the LCRA radio agreement. Lynn, ready to go on that one? So we're ready to go on that one. Continued discussion regarding creation of a public housing authority. We'll keep that item on for now. That is it for the May 16th meeting.
You want to, Emily, you think you want to report on the THC connection at that meeting?
Sure.
Let's have that. I've asked her to follow up to see what our options are there. With Fort Martin Scott. Go ahead.
That's it.
All right. We have one executive session item today. Read it for me.
No, you go ahead.
City council will, upon the, may take action on any item posted, sorry, pursuant to section 551.71. We're discussing pending or contemplated litigation related to short-term rentals.
I move we go out of regular session into executive session.
Second.
Motion second to go out of regular into executive. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.